Hey guys, it's Chef Nick from the Fat Sparrow Group. Welcome back into my kitchen. Today we're cooking a guilty pleasure, filet mignon. Bacon wrapped, mustard rubbed. We're gonna do tableside Caesar salad with baked potatoes. We're even gonna do a blue cheese gratin on top of the steak. This is the kind of dish that will blow anybody's mind. Is relatively easy to cook. It's a little more into the higher prices because we're dealing with tenderloin and anchovies and blue cheese, but man is it worth it as a treat a couple times a year. So I'm excited to have an excuse to cook it. Thank you guys for providing that for me. Let's dive into our box and see what we've got. We've got a lemon. We have 2 russet potatoes for our baked potatoes. We have our Gunpowder Chili spice mix. We're using that instead of peppercorns on the traditional Dijon mustard and peppercorn crusted steak. We have some Parmesan cheese and blue cheese. We have some sour cream for our baked potato. We've got anchovies. We've got breadcrumbs, our salt and olive oil. We have an egg and some butter. We have a head of romaine lettuce, garlic, breadcrumbs. Then what did I see over here? We'll find out later. Mustard for our Caesar salad, breadcrumbs, and our bacon and our steaks. All right, awesome. Let's get cooking. Let's make something amazing. So for our filet mignon recipe, the baked potatoes will be the first thing we get started just because they take a little while on the barbecue. So we've got our nice russet potatoes. I know you've probably all baked a potato before, so you can fast forward through this if you want. I'm just gonna take my fork, stab a few holes in the skin of my baked potato. That's just gonna help me make sure it's cooking kind of quickly helps get that steam throughout it. And I'm also going to be seasoning it, so those holes will let the salt kind of find its way inside the potato as we roast it. So we've got her nice and poked up here. Carefully you don't stab your hand. I've got 2 sheets of tin foil. I've kind of crisscross applesauce them. This tin foil I'm using isn't the world's toughest tin foil in the world, so that's why I've got 2 layers. If you've got tougher tin foil, just use 1. They're just going on the barbecue today. If they were going in a fire, you might want to even triple them up. So a little salt, then I'm going to put a little olive oil. This is the only thing that'll differ from your typical baked potato recipe and my baked potato recipe is the salt and the olive oil. Because I want to be able to eat my skin of my potato. And I know you can eat the skin of any baked potato, but it's a lot better when it's got salt and olive oil on it. It'll get it a little crispier, it'll make it taste really good. So now I'm just going to wrap these suckers up. The olive oil and salt will find its way around on its own. I don't need to fuss about it. I'll wrap them, make sure there's no glaring holes, and we'll throw them on the barbecue. So to wrap it, it's pretty simple. I'm just going to get one side over and kind of pinch it up, roll it over on itself like that. And then I'll just do the second layer, same thing. Actually, I'll turn it so that my rolls end up on a different side. And then the thing's kind of been doubled and even triple covered at different spots. So that's ready to go, and it'll find its way to the barbecue. All right, let's get cooking. So the first thing we're gonna do is get all our prep work out of the way. I think that's especially important with all of our dishes. You've heard me talk about it before, the mise en place, but it's really important with this dish. When we're talking about steak, especially beef tenderloin, the window of cooking your steak perfectly is pretty small, and you don't want to be fussing around with a lot of other stuff when you're doing that. So let's get as much of our work out of the way as we can, and then we will be set to get cooking. We're also going to be doing the Caesar salad tableside, and I encourage you to do this at home for your guests. It's a lot of fun, and it's just a cool way to present that dish. So with this, we're going to actually have a bit of theater at the table just before we go to eat. So again, you want to make sure everything is in its place and ready to go. So we'll start with some chives. I didn't mention these in the unboxing, but I did find them in there. So we've got chives for our baked potatoes. I'm just gonna cut those into nice little rings. Nothing makes sour cream better the way chives make sour cream better. Sour cream is sometimes just an excuse to get chives into your system. I love the smell of these guys. So we've got our nice finely chopped chives. We'll put those into a bowl and set them aside. Next we'll do our lemon. So we're gonna juice and zest our lemon. We're gonna keep them separate from one another because they're for different purposes. The zest is gonna go in our blue cheese gratin. The juice is gonna go in our Caesar salad. So I'm using my microplane. You can use a box grater, the fine holes, or you can use a vegetable peeler to do this. And we're just trying to get the yellow part. We don't want the white part as it's quite bitter. Just get all of it. Next we'll do our lemon juice. We want to bruise the lemon a little bit just to make sure that juice comes out willingly. And then we'll cut it in half. I'm not seeing any seeds. Oh, so far no seeds, incredible. We're just gonna get as much of that lemon juice out as possible. Caesar salad is all about those sort of strong flavors. We've got garlic, anchovies, lemon, Parmesan cheese. They're really gonna make that balance, that intense salad dressing. Next, you need an egg yolk. If you've ordered the meal kit for 2, you're gonna have 2 egg yolks to worry about. I've only got the 1. We only want the yolk, we don't want the white. So when you break your egg, you know, we always sort of thought we should break eggs on the side of things. Don't do that because you're actually gonna send bits of the eggshell into the egg and you might break the yolk itself. And we don't want to because we wanna make sure we get the white separated from the yolk. So break it on the edge of a cutting board, or sorry, not the edge, the flat part of a board or a tabletop. And then just using your hands, you can kind of separate one from the other. And then we're gonna use the shell to pass it back and forth to get rid of all of the white. And as you're doing that, you'll notice you're just kind of, each pass, a little bit more of the white comes off and falls into the bowl below. If you wanted to, you could use your hands to do this. Another method is just to crack the whole egg into the bowl and use your hands to pull the yolk out. I'm using these 2 shells so I don't gross you folks out, but normally I actually just use my hands. All right, so then into this bowl goes our yolk only. And in this bowl, I have my white. We can save this, egg white omelets. We can whisk it into a soup last second for a stracciatella type effect. We could make pavlova out of it. We could do a whole bunch of things. I'm gonna save mine for just a little breakfast later. The only other bit of mise en place or prep to worry about is getting our butter out, making sure it's soft. We're gonna need that for our gratin. So I've had this out at room temperature for about an hour now. It'll be nice and soft and easy to work with. Then my final task of prep or mise en place is just the lettuce. So we've got romaine hearts, we've washed them. I recommend you wash them again at home, and I'm just gonna tear these up. I'm gonna leave them in pretty big pieces because it's just gonna be part of the presentation later. We're gonna have forks and knives at the table, so forks and knives can be used. But I want nice big pieces. In fact, this one I'm just gonna leave whole. I'll leave a couple of those whole. It'll just help me build up a nice big salad. So I'm gonna set aside my romaine. I've got all of my mise en place for my Caesar salad together in one place. I've got my other ingredients ready to go. Let's get started actually cooking some food. All right, we're gonna make our blue cheese gratin, the topping for our beef tenderloin. So this is just inspired by trips to my favorite guilty pleasure steakhouse, a certain chain that makes its way across Canada, and we're just doing a little playful riff on that. So we've got our nice softened butter here. We've got our lemon zest. I'm just gonna add that into it. We have our blue cheese. This is a must for this recipe. Do not try and skip the blue cheese. Into the butter it goes. Nothing says indulgent like mixing blue cheese and butter together. So I'm just gonna kind of gently fold those 2 things together, smearing them kind of around on each other. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is add my breadcrumbs. So into that goes my breadcrumbs. And then without making too much of a mess, I'm just using the back of my spoon to kind of combine those 2 things together. We're not making a masterpiece here. We're just trying to incorporate the blue cheese and the butter into those breadcrumbs so that when we put it on the barbecue on top of the steaks, the butter melts and kind of activates those breadcrumbs and makes them really nice and crispy and crunchy. And of course the blue cheese will do its thing. I know this doesn't look like much, but it'll be perfect for the steaks. And keep in mind, all that butter is gonna melt away, leaving behind just these beautiful, aromatic, rich, flavored breadcrumbs with blue cheese. I didn't put any salt in there because the blue cheese is salty enough on its own, so I didn't think it needed any. And if you wanna add more, by all means do. I think it's pretty good just the way it is. So I'm gonna set that aside, and then we'll get ready to crust our steaks. All right, let's prepare our beef tenderloin. So beef tenderloin is quite a fancy cut of meat. It's very lean, very tender, obviously by its name, we know that. It's a muscle on the back of the cow that generally doesn't do anything when the cow's spending its life day to day. So it's very underused. So it's a little lower on flavor, higher on beautiful texture, and very lean, very easy cooking meat. So with that in mind, with the lower in flavor part, I'm not afraid to throw a little extra flavor at it because it's gonna want that help. It's gonna need the boost. So in this case, we're using our Fat Sparrow grainy mustard. Awesome product, nice pungency to it, sharp sort of bite. We're gonna smear it around the outer edge of this piece of meat. This piece of meat is so tender, it actually just came apart a bit on me. We're gonna smear that mustard around, and we're gonna need it because the mustard's gonna help us stick the chili rub that we're gonna put on it. Normally, in a traditional steakhouse, you wouldn't use a chili rub. You would use a peppercorn, cracked peppercorns, but I just love this gunpowder chili rub that we've created. It's got 7 different chili peppers in it. They're really nice and aromatic. They're not overly spicy, and it's awesome in this recipe. So I'm taking my tenderloin, and I'm just using the edge of it that I crusted in that mustard, and I'm just rolling it around in our gunpowder chili mix. So easy peasy, that one is done. I'm gonna move on and do the second one now. Same thing. Doesn't take a lot of mustard to get this done, so just work with a little bit at a time. And you notice I did take my mustard out of my jar and put it in a small bowl, just because I'm kind of going back and forth to a piece of raw meat and back into the mustard, so I wouldn't want to contaminate my whole jar with this raw meat. So if you're dealing with a jar at home, keep that in mind. If you just have the little container we sent you, then you don't have to worry as much. So mustard's on it, I'm rolling it around in that chili rub, and I'm fully crusting it. You don't have to worry, this stuff is not overly spicy. It's probably no more spicy than the peppercorns we would have used, so don't be shy. Get in there with that spice. The next thing we're gonna do is take our bacon slice and we're gonna wrap it around. So I've wrapped my bacon around my tenderloin, and now I'm just using toothpicks to hold it in place. So we'll remove these toothpicks later when we're cooking. In the meantime, I'm just kind of pinching it in and then putting that in place with my toothpick. If you have to cut your piece of bacon to make it wrap around the whole thing, don't be shy to do that. You can just kind of taper off one edge. I had to do that with this one because my steak was so wide. Now I'm gonna just repeat the process with my next one, and I'll need a couple of fresh toothpicks. So my bacon was a little bit too short to get around my whole tenderloin, so I've actually just on an angle where my widest piece of bacon was, I cut off another piece. So now I've got kind of 2 pieces to work with. That'll help me get around the whole thing. Awesome. So there we have our bacon wrapped tenderloins. I'm gonna set these aside and we'll get ready to go to the grill soon. So we've got our tenderloins wrapped, they're covered in mustard and the chili spice. The last thing I'm gonna do is just put a little bit of olive oil and a little bit of salt on the 2 cooking surfaces, which of course will be the cut side, the non-bacon wrapped side. Ever so delicately, once we've got our bacon on it, we're kind of being careful, and a little salt and a little tiny bit of olive oil. We just need enough to put it on the surface. We're not trying to douse it or marinate it. The bacon's gonna provide lots of sort of natural fat, so we're gonna have that lovely flavor. The olive oil is just to help us when we're on the grill. So our baked potatoes are on, as you can see. We've got them up on the top shelf. They're gonna take about 45 minutes. They've been on for 20 already. Now we'll throw our steak on. I'm gonna put it on the hottest spot of my grill. You'll know where yours is. We're gonna leave it in place. We only wanna turn the steak 4 times total, once on both sides, just to give it those hash marks, and then we'll flip it. Probably takes about 6 minutes total to cook these tenderloins. And don't forget, you're gonna have to add the gratin. So when you're about 2 or 3 minutes away from them being done, we'll top it with the gratin. So my steaks are about 2 minutes away. I'm gonna put my crumble on. I'm just using my fingers to kind of break it up as I do so I don't have any large chunks. Remember, this stuff is 80% butter, so it's gonna flare up on the grill. Now that my gratin's on, I'm gonna close the lid. I'll leave it for about 2 minutes just to give it a chance to brown off and render out that butter. We'll come back in 2 minutes. Okay, so it's time to build our tableside Caesar salad. Our steaks are resting, our potatoes are done. Just enough time to make this. I've got my guests at my table. They are gonna wanna see this. If you've ever been to a French bistro or a sort of classic steakhouse restaurant where they do these kinds of things, it's a ton of fun to have tableside presentation. I've always loved it. I love the romance of it all. So we're gonna start with our garlic in our bowl. I've got 2 cloves in here. That's because I like it really garlicky. If you don't like it that garlicky, then you can take one of those cloves out, but I want mine to be really punchy, really full of flavor. So I've added my salt to the bowl. The salt's gonna act as my agitator, my abrasing sort of component. It's gonna help me break down that garlic. It's also gonna taste amazing. If you had a wooden bowl, the traditional thing to use is a wooden bowl. I don't have one, but I've got this nice heavy duty bowl that's gonna work really well, and a fork. So I'm literally just gonna take my fork and I'm gonna get into the bowl and I'm gonna make a huge mess and I'm gonna crush my garlic. Once you get the first couple crushes out of the way, it gets a little easier because the salt starts to do its thing and break it down for you. I can smell that garlic already. It's fantastic. And instantly, as that salt starts to do its thing, this gets easier and easier to break down. It starts to form a little bit of a paste all on its own because the salt's just bringing out the oils and the natural juices that live within that garlic. So I've got my garlic sort of 75% broken down. I'm gonna want it to go a little bit further, but I also know I'm gonna add a couple more things before I'm done sort of macerating and mashing. So now that I'm about here, I'm gonna take a quick pause, scrape any large chunks off, give it one more kind of crushing, and then I'm gonna add my next set of ingredients. And then keep in mind, this will keep breaking down, so we're not done with it yet. So the next 2 things we're gonna add are cracked black peppercorn, as much or as little as you like. Again, I like mine pretty strong. I want a pretty strong dressing, so I'm adding quite a bit. You, of course, yours came pre-cracked. We cracked it for you at the restaurant, so you can just add as little or as much of that as you like. If you have one of these at home, it would be a good time to use it because the freshness of the peppercorn in there really does make a difference. The next thing I'm gonna do is add my anchovies. Again, add as little or as much as you like. I know that seeing anchovies like this might turn you off a little bit, but once it's incorporated into the dressing, it really does become an important part of the flavor profile. So don't skip them all together. I know you might be tempted to. Throw them in there. If you're a little bit scared, just add the one, but I highly recommend you just put them all in. So I've got my peppercorn, my slightly crushed garlic, my anchovies, and I'm gonna go back to it, crushing it with the fork. This time kind of focusing on those anchovies because I don't want to bite into a huge chunk of it. I want it to be nice and macerated into that garlic because it's part of a dressing. It's not an ingredient that I want to taste necessarily on its own. All right, we've got our garlic, our anchovies. It's all nice and macerated. It's looking rather ugly, but trust me, it's going to come together nicely. And it's actually starting to smell like Caesar salad. My first job ever, I was a prep cook at a fancy restaurant in downtown Kitchener, and one of my jobs every other day was to make the Caesar salad dressing. And this is exactly how I would smell when I was finished it. Just a mixture of anchovies and garlic. Amazing. All right, so we've got that slightly mushed up. The next things I'm gonna add are my egg yolk. In it goes. My egg yolk is stubbornly stuck to the side of my bowl. My egg yolk is gonna act as the emulsifier. It's gonna help me make a bound dressing instead of a broken vinaigrette. It's also gonna make it really creamy, really delicious tasting. The next thing I'm gonna add is my fat Sparrow grainy mustard. You can add as little as much as you like. I'm adding about a teaspoon, maybe a little more, to my vinaigrette. Again, I like the punchiness that that's gonna provide. It's also gonna help bind my salad together, and it's gonna add a really nice sort of freshness to the whole thing. So now I've got those 2 things in, my anchovies. I'm truly starting to see this come together as more of a dressing now. And I'm just using my fork to keep bashing it up, keep making sure those larger chunks are getting broken down a little bit, and I'm emulsifying all those ingredients together. Now the next thing I'll do is add alternating between my lemon juice and my olive oil. We're dealing with a really nice olive oil here. It's gonna taste great. It's also gonna act properly. It's not gonna split on me. It's gonna sort of stay together as I mix the 2 things together. So I literally put a little splash of olive oil. I'll go in, I'll use my fork, and I'm just kind of using my fork as if it were a whisk. and folding and sort of whisking those things together. Now I'll take a little bit of lemon juice, put it in, same thing. Just get in there with your fork and use it almost like a whisk. I'm scraping against the bowl as I go to keep agitating those ingredients, keep breaking them down. And you can see it's sort of forming a nice creamy dressing. Next, we'll do another little splash of olive oil. Emulsify it. You don't want to rush these steps. If I put too much in too fast, then it won't stick together. It'll break apart. It's not the big deal if it does break apart, but if you're having any chef friends over, they might tease you. I know I got made fun of a lot if my mayonnaise or my aiolis ever broke on me. So, one more addition of lemon juice. You can see every time I add the lemon juice, it makes the whole thing a little bit whiter in color. It starts to look more and more and more like a proper dressing. And then our last little addition of olive oil. You can see it's come together nicely. And then finally, I'm gonna add my Parmesan cheese. I know that you're used to seeing Parmesan cheese on top of Caesar salads. Because it's part of the dressing, I'm gonna add it now because I wanna remember that this is gonna add a lot of salt. So if I were to add it just as a garnish later, I'd wanna make sure I hold back some of my salt in this dressing. But I like it in it because I really like the texture that the cheese kind of develops as it mixes into the salad dressing. And you just get this really nice kind of salty, cheesy bite every time you bite into a lettuce. So that's looking really good. It's held together nicely for me. Now it's just a matter of making sure it tastes good. Whenever you taste a dressing, you don't want to taste the dressing on its own because the dressing on its own is going to taste too salty, too vinegary, too powerful. You're never going to eat dressing on its own. You're always going to eat it on something. So when you're tasting it, grab a piece of lettuce, give it a try, say, oh man, that's good. I nailed it. So mine's perfect the way it is. I'm going to add my lettuce to it. Give it a gentle fold. I don't want to bruise this lettuce up or overwork it, so I'm just going to give it a nice gentle fold, and then we'll be done. I'm getting just enough of that anchovy flavor. This is really good. I taste the anchovies, but it's not overpowering. The garlic comes in, sort of takes over, gives you that really hot, really spicy garlic breath flavor, and then the lemon juice and the extra virgin olive oil and the mustard all do their job and sort of cleanse the palate. This is awesome. This is definitely one of my favorite dishes, and it's gonna go perfectly with this baked potato and steak. All right, so everything's ready to go. Our steak's nice and the crust is nice and brown. We've rested it for a few minutes. Our baked potatoes are cooked and ready to go. I'm just gonna build a plate. So I'm gonna take a baked potato. You know how to do this. Splay it open. If you're a butter person, you can add butter. If you're a sour cream person like me, you can add sour cream. If you're a both person, then you're a really good person, you can do both. So I'm just gonna dollop on some sour cream there. It'll make its way around. I'm gonna throw on a whole bunch of chives. This is one of my favorite parts, so I'm not gonna be shy. Then we've got our Caesar salad here. We've got our nice, beautiful anchovies and garlic vinaigrette. I'll just kind of try and build it up with a little bit of height here. And finally, we'll come back with some steak, the main feature of this dish. Got our salad. And then remember to take your toothpicks out. Try not to lose your bacon. And then just transfer your steak over to that plate. And that's it. This has to be one of my favorite meals, whether it's at a restaurant or at home. I just can't wait to dig into this. Caesar salad, baked potatoes, filet mignon, what could get better? Thank you guys so much for joining me. From Chef Nick and everyone at Fat Sparrow, we really appreciate your support. I hope you had fun today, having a little extra fun at the table. I can't wait to dig into this. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.